Show of hands. How many of you have heard of Bill Gates? Raise your hand if you've heard of Bill Gates. Okay. How many of you have heard of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation? Raise your hand. How many have heard anything, something, or are familiar with the Gates Scholarship? Raise your hand if you're familiar with it. So the Gates Scholarship is the premier scholarship for low-income minority students in the country. How many of you know who runs the Gates Scholarship? Let's see, about 4. Who runs the Gates Scholarship? The Hispanic Scholarship Fund. I'm sharing that because what we're here to do today is to try to talk about myths and realities, and sometimes facts are really important. I would say part of it is our fault for not letting you know that we do it, but we do the best we can. And the other part is sometimes we can't imagine that organizations like HSF or Voto Latino can actually be responsible for those kinds of organizations. What I want to do really quick is share some information about HSF that you can take home with you and to hopefully demystify a few things that relate to Latinos in higher education, some of which we've heard already. Since 1975, HSF has awarded over $619 million in scholarships. We have 65,000 alumni across the country. What's powering what we do today is a technology infrastructure that, with the help of investors like Wells Fargo and Target, have allowed us to invest over $6 million to build out a technology platform that has allowed us to create scholarships like the Gates Scholarship. Recently, with funding from the Eli Lilly Endowment, the Hispanic Career Pathways Initiative. This is a program that will provide career service guidance to between 200,000 to 300,000 Hispanic college students across the country. We also run the Wells Fargo Academic Leaders Fellowship Program, so for our friends from Wells Fargo here, thank you for your support. In addition to all of the Hispanic Scholarship Fund scholarships that many of you are familiar with. We also have now over 1.3 million individuals that have created a MyHSF account. So if you are a reader, a volunteer, a mentor, if you've applied for a scholarship or one of your kids has applied for a scholarship, they have a MyHSF account. 3.6 million Latinos in college. Last year we had 72,000 applications. We selected 10,000 students to be HSF scholars, and unfortunately, we're only able to fund about 1 in 5 of those scholars. The rest of those scholars are eligible for support services, but we're only able to give scholarships to one out of 5 eligible scholars. One important point that I think is important for everybody here in the room, the HSF scholarship is a merit-based scholarship. One of the things that we're finding, and many of you in this room are experiencing this, is that the people within the Latino community that are experiencing the biggest squeeze for higher education isn't the wealthy, and it's not low-income students. It's middle-income parents all across the country, and so we're doing our best to ensure that even your kids, if they're qualified, can apply and be accepted as an HSF scholar. This is the scholar profile. Even though it's a merit-based scholarship, 60% of our scholars are first-generation low-income students, which just proves the point that we can compete with, that our students are competing across the board regardless of their income. We have scholars in 48 states. Importantly, 65% of our scholars are from a top 100 university. 30% are from a top 25 university. As you can see, the women are beating out the men for... And we have scholars at 532 institutions across the country. HSF, in addition to all the work we do programs and events, Parents for Students and Programs. We have a program going on at NYU tomorrow. We have a team there. We do all this program for scholars and for alumni. And then we have our strategic partnership programs. In total, 171 events that the team delivers across the country. 12 of those events are multi-day events, like the event. So next week, as an example, we'll be in New York City for our board meeting, our annual meeting with our investors, our Alumni Hall of Fame Gala, and our finance conference that brings together our scholars who have an interest in finance. Then in addition to the programs, are the support services that we provide to parents and students, our scholars and alumni, and then to parents through our digital, parents, students, and scholars and alumni through digital content. We have over 5 million visitors that visit hsf.net. If you haven't, I highly encourage you to do that. If you have kids in college who haven't applied to the scholarship, if they're great students and are competitive, they should be applying to the scholarship to take advantage of the resources. And down on the bottom, you'll notice those are the conferences that we put on for our scholars. And as I mentioned, we're doing the finance conference coming up. This is another aspect of what we do that most people don't know about. We now have a team of 8 full-time recruiters that work with our partners to place students in internships and full-time employment opportunities, and we're working to expand that to our 65,000 alumni. So obviously you recognize some of the partners that are there that support the work that we do. Our alumni across the country, 65,000 strong. Advisory councils. For those of you who might be interested in supporting the work of HSF, we now have 35 advisory councils across the country. Next year, we're expanding to Sacramento, Orange County, Northwest Arkansas, Omaha, and Milwaukee. And these advisory councils help support the work that we do. Here's a list of some of the partners that support the work that we do at HSF. Importantly, as someone who might think about supporting an organization like HSF, one of the things that I know that I look for is the efficiency and impact. So 90% of the money that we raise goes to support scholarships and programs, and only 10% is for administration and processing. Top rated by all the national watchdog groups that rate all of the charities in the country. And now, let me just spend a little bit of time on a couple of things that I would call myths versus reality. I just kind of gave you, I went ahead and did a, what do you call it, a spoiler alert? So for those of you who saw that, you'll know the answer now. What percentage of Latino youth in the United States are are U.S. citizens? What percentage of Latino youth under 18 are U.S. citizens? Any guesses? 80%? How many of you think that's too high? Raise your hand if you really believe that's too high. A few of you. Yeah, most people usually say 60, 65. I've heard as low as 50, 40%. 93% of Latino youth in the United States under the age of 18 are U.S. citizens. So what? So what? You can, and this isn't going to happen, but you can impose the most draconian immigration policies you can imagine, and it isn't going to change anything about our country. 93% of Latinos under 18 in the United States are 93. Actually, and this was in The Economist in 2014. The number's actually gone up. And so what does this matter, right? It matters because facts matter. It matters because if we have this in the back of our mind as we're thinking about policy, we're able to take a step back and understand how we can move forward, and especially how it's going to impact organizations like HSF. A survey by Latino Decisions asked non-Hispanics to guess the percentage of undocumented Spanish-speaking immigrants in the United States. They guessed 1 out of every 3. Anybody want to guess at what the percentage of Latinos in the U.S. that are U.S. citizens? Any guesses? Mostly, again, 50%, 60%, 79%. Now, we're not talking about young people, okay? So we're good with 18 and under, but we're good every other way, too. Almost 80% of Latinos in this country are U.S. citizens. Why does HSF exist? Because the glass is half full. What do I mean? We've all talked about, you've heard about these statistics today. The buying power, GDP, the sheer number of Latinos, the fact that every 30 seconds a Latino turns 18. What we also see in education is the dramatic drop in the dropout rate. The dropout rate for Latinos now is about 10%. The fact that we have that's right. The fact that we have 3.6 million Hispanics in college today. That third infographic that you see, what that shows is that Hispanic high school graduates are now going to college at a higher rate than the general population. And then finally, that Latinos comprise about 19% of all college students in the US. This shows the real dropout rate over time. Again, facts. This is something that if you're armed with these facts, when you're having a conversation about who the Latino community is and how we're not living up to what we need to live up to, is just plain and simply false. So last quiz. What is the ratio of Asian American to Latinos in college in the US? The ratio of Asian Americans in college to Latinos in the US. Any guesses?
2 to 1.
2 to 1? 2 to 1. Anybody else? 5 to 1? 3 to 1? Most people guess 3 to 1. 3 Asian Americans to every Latino in college. That sounds about right, right? It's actually almost the inverse. There are 2.5 times more Latinos in college than there are Asian Americans in college. I'll say that again. There are 2.5 times more Latinos in college than there are Asian Americans in college. And in fact, there's 1.6 to 1 for African American and Latino as well, if you look at this chart. Why is that important? It's important because the perception and the narrative that we have about who we are as a community is basically being driven by myths, not by facts. And you say, well, Fidel, what are these numbers? Where are they coming from? US Census Bureau current population survey. Well, Fidel, what about are they all going to community college? Are they all going to, I didn't ask that question. I asked what ratio of Latinos are actually going to college. And that's the perception. And for those that are here from our corporate partners that are supporting Latitude and NADEP and HSF, you don't sell to percentages. You sell to people. So when you think about the growth of Latinos that are going to college, that are getting their educations, if you're an airline and you're selling business class seats, who are you selling to? You're selling to, if you're a luxury automaker, if you're a financial services firm, where is your market and who is it into the future? And so that's something that we want to continue to focus on at HSF. So what this means for us is a continued demand for the services that we provide, not just for the scholarships, but to prepare these students for their future. And I guess the one thing I would want you to take away, in addition to the sort of the facts that there are 2.5 times more Latinos in college than Asian American, not good or better, just facts, that 93% of Latinos under 18 are US citizens, is that sharing that information and being empowered by that information in your conversations that you're having about who we are as a community will in fact make a difference. Thank you very much.